Hey guys, Scott here from Peak Prosper. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the power of vulnerability. How vulnerability really is a catalyst into creating the life of our dreams. Stepping beyond our complacency and our comfort zone and really leaning into opportunities to create the life that we truly desire to lead. I'm also going to be talking about how vulnerability and the feelings that it bring up can be one of the greatest protective mechanisms that prevent us from going into harmful emotional or physical situations. So, first, let's talk about what vulnerability is and what vulnerability is not. So, vulnerability is really the possibility of being exposed to a situation that may cause physical or emotional harm. I think the key word there for most of us to understand is it may cause harm. Now, this possibility of being exposed to a harmful situation is really just a perception of an illusion of what might occur, oftentimes. However, vulnerable situations can cause physical and emotional harm. But if we use them as a catalyst, an opportunity to really lean into the things that we're maybe afraid of doing, we have the ability to transform our lives into something beyond our wildest imagination. Brene Brown said, "Vulnerability is not a weakness. Vulnerability is a sign of courage." And I believe that courage is the catalyst to actually leaning into vulnerable situations and opportunities that align with the actions that are necessary to turn the life of our dreams into a reality. So let's talk a little bit about the vulnerability risk meter. And if we look at this risk meter now, again, vulnerability being a situation that could possibly cause emotional or physical harm. And we get really clear about low, medium, and high risk thresholds in different situations. Then we have the ability to begin gauging as to whether or not an opportunity, an experience that presents itself, is something that we should actually lean into or not. Now, if we look at the low end of this vulnerability meter that I've created up here, this is where growth does not occur. This is where complacency thrives, and we just get stuck in our current way of thinking and being and believing and acting. Again, this is not where growth occurs. Growth has a tendency to occur right in the medium threshold, where our talents, our skills, our daily way of doing things is challenged. We're pushed outside of our comfort zone. If we look at the risk meter here and just go into the high threshold, this is actually where we're kind of dancing with some very dangerous emotions and putting ourselves at physical and emotional risk, meaning that the possibility of harm is becoming more and more real for us, even if we're still just operating under a fear illusion, meaning that the probability of something bad happening in a vulnerable situation is still pretty low, but our mind has created a video inside of it that it believes the bad thing is going to happen, such that our emotions become intoxicating. We're living in a state of fear instead of a state of joy, optimism, and growth, which is oftentimes what is experienced when we're at this medium threshold of vulnerability. So I'd next like to talk about a couple of questions that you might ask yourself before leaning into what feels like a vulnerable situation or an opportunity that is stretching you to grow beyond your current comfort zone. And these three questions are: what? Is it rational or irrational? And what's the best and worst case scenario? So let's kind of unpack what each of these questions is and what they mean. So the first question is what? And this is just you consciously asking yourself, what is the situation or opportunity that's been presented to me right now that's making me feel a little bit of fear, a little bit of uncertainty, maybe a little bit of anxiety? What is the opportunity? Maybe it's an opportunity to ask a girl out that you've been crushing on. Maybe it's an opportunity to have a vulnerable conversation with your partner that maybe you've been putting off for several months. Perhaps it's an opportunity to transition to a completely new career. Or it could be the simplest of things, like changing your daily routine and doing something new. So consciously just ask yourself, what is the situation or the opportunity that's being presented to you that's bringing up some of these vulnerable emotions? It's next important to just ask yourself, is my fear of this action, this situation, a rational fear? Meaning that the probability of me being physically or emotionally harmed through this is really high? Or is this an irrational illusion, an irrational story that I've created in my mind that's preventing me from really leaning in to taking the actions that are necessary to turn what I most desire into a reality? This question will really influence whether or not you actually lean into taking that action and stepping into a vulnerable situation. The second to last question is to just ask yourself, what is the best case scenario? What is the best possible outcome if I lean into this vulnerable situation, this vulnerable opportunity? What's the best thing that could happen in my life? And almost equally as powerful and equally as important, what's the worst case scenario? And what is the probability of that worst case scenario actually happening? So what's the best case? What's the worst case? Then with all of this conscious information collected, you have the ability to make a conscious decision as to whether or not stepping into this vulnerable situation is in your pocket of growth, meaning it's a medium level vulnerable situation, or if it's outside of your pocket of growth, it's a high risk situation. So I hope that this helps bring some clarity to some of the things that you might be fearing in taking action around. Remember, fear is oftentimes something that we should feel and take the action anyway. One of my mentors, he says, feel the fear and do it anyway. But it's important to gut check things. Ask yourself a couple of questions before just stepping into the fear and jumping in to that which is a vulnerable situation. I'd like to leave you with one challenge as we wrap up today's video, and that is to put yourself into a vulnerable situation this week. Step beyond your comfort zone. Go do something that is outside of your norm, something that challenges you to grow, something that you've been putting off for a long time. And as a layer of accountability, please share that which you are going to go do this week in the comments below. And also just share what it is that you took out of today's video. And if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing at Peak Prosper, just go ahead and visit peakprosper.com or check out the free training that I've included in the description of this video below. That's it for today. Peace.